Hello. Tonight, we're stepping back in time, not to a grand emperor's court or a bustling forum, but to a quieter, more intimate and often unsettling corner of ancient Rome. Imagine yourself there, suddenly transported. You're not a legionary marching to glory, nor a senator holding sway in the Curia. Instead, you find yourself within the opulent yet rigidly hierarchical confines of a powerful Roman household, perhaps a sprawling villa on the Palatine Hill, or a more modest, though still impressive, dwelling in a quieter part of the city. The air is thick with the scent of olive oil and exotic spices, perhaps a hint of jasmine from an inner courtyard. Servants move silently through the marbled halls, their bare feet whispering on the cool stone. You might hear the distant murmur of Latin voices, or the gentle splash of a fountain. This isn't a world of your making, and your place within it is both privileged and profoundly precarious. You are seen, but perhaps not truly known, desired, yet entirely disposable. It's a delicate balance, one you're forced to navigate every single day. And just a cheeky reality check. In this era, you probably wouldn't survive a week without a patron, let alone a lifetime. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You might find yourself dressed in fine tunics, perhaps even with a delicate chain or a piece of jewellery given by your patron. Your hair might be meticulously styled, your skin cared for with fragrant oils. You could be lounging on a cushioned divan, perhaps by a window overlooking a vibrant garden, or in a private chamber waiting for a summons. The silence can be profound, broken only by the chirping of cicadas outside, or the distant city hum. This seemingly peaceful scene, however, belies a constant underlying tension. You are a concubiness, a term in ancient Rome that in your specific context denotes a younger man or boy kept by a more powerful man for sexual and sometimes emotional companionship. Unlike the formal institution of concubinatus for male-female unions, which had some legal standing, your position as a concubinus held no such protections. It was informal, driven by personal desire and power dynamics, and entirely at the discretion of your patron. You are not a wife, not a recognized partner, and certainly not an equal. Your role is primarily one of pleasure and availability, a living ornament within a powerful man's life. Historians still argue whether the term concubinus always implied a younger individual, but certainly the power differential was key. You are not just a person, you are a possession in many ways. This fact, while perhaps softened by outward luxuries, is the bedrock of your daily existence, the precariousness of your status. Your status, or rather your lack thereof, is perhaps the most defining characteristic of your life as a concubinus. Unlike the Roman institution of matrimonium, legal marriage, or even the semi-recognized concubinatus, a long-term non-marital union between a man and a woman, often of different social standings, that still carried some social acceptance and limited legal implications, especially concerning inheritance for offspring, your particular arrangement has no official standing. Absolutely none. You are, in essence, a private indulgence, existing in a legal limbo that offers no protection or recognition. The term concubinus itself, when referring to male-male relationships, carries a different weight. It's less about a stable partnership and more about a stark power dynamic, an older, more powerful man taking a younger one. You are, in a very real sense, defined by this informal, often unspoken contract. It's a bit like having a friends with benefits arrangement, except one party owns the other, controls their every move, and could decide to end the arrangement, and your very existence on a whim. Talk about uneven playing fields, right? This informal nature means you have no legal recourse, no formal protections that a wife or even a female concubina might possess. If your patron decides he no longer wants you, or if he takes a new fancy, you could find yourself cast out, sold, or simply ignored. There's no alimony, no shared property, no, it's complicated Facebook status to soften the blow. Your world is built on the shifting sands of your patron's affection and his societal standing, a foundation as unreliable as the tides. Historians still argue whether the term concubinus always implied a sexual relationship, or if it could sometimes refer to a purely companionate one. But in most contexts, it's safe to say that sexual availability was a primary expectation. You are a commodity, and your value is tied directly to your patron's desire and pride. You might find yourself accompanying your patron to the public baths or to a private dinner party, but your presence isn't as an equal guest. You're there as an extension of his status, a silent testament to his wealth and influence. Think of it like a very expensive, very beautiful accessory. One day you're in vogue, the next you're relegated to a dusty chest. It's a peculiar tidbit of Roman social structure where certain relationships were openly acknowledged but legally invisible. This invisibility, paradoxically, is what grants your patron so much control and you so little. The threads of your life are held firmly in his hands, ready to be cut at his choosing. The brutal reality of enslavement. Now let's consider the most prevalent scenario for a concubinus. You are a slave. This isn't just a detail, it is the fundamental, crushing reality that dictates every breath you take. As an enslaved individual in ancient Rome, you are considered property, not a person with rights, but an object, a chattel, no different in the eyes of the law than a piece of furniture or a particularly well-bred horse. Your body, your labour, your very being belong to your owner. This isn't just a legal abstraction, it's a lived, brutal truth. Your life, down to the most intimate details, is entirely at the whim of your patron, who holds the dual role of owner and lover. It's a power dynamic that is, to put it mildly, terrifyingly absolute. Imagine waking up each morning not knowing what the day holds or what mood your master might be in. There's no union, no workers' rights, no legal aid society to call upon if things go south. If your patron decides to inflict physical or emotional abuse, there is virtually no one you can turn to. The state will not intervene. Your fellow slaves are often too preoccupied with their own precarious existences to offer meaningful help, and free Romans would simply see it as a master exercising his rightful authority over his property. It's a bit like being a pet goldfish in a very large, very beautiful bowl. You might have pretty pebbles and a little castle, but ultimately your existence is entirely dependent on the person who drops the food flakes in, and who could at any moment decide to flush you. A peculiar tidbit about Roman slavery is the sheer diversity of roles slaves could hold, from highly educated tutors to brutal miners. But for you, the intimacy of your servitude adds another layer of vulnerability, making escape or even complaint almost unthinkable. This precariousness extends to your very presence in the household. Your patron could sell you at any time, for any reason or no reason at all. You could be traded for debt, given as a gift, or simply disposed of if you fall out of favour. One day, you might be enjoying the relative comforts of a wealthy Roman villa. The next, you could find yourself shackled and marched to a slave market, destined for a gladiatorial school or a life of back-breaking labour in the fields. The emotional whiplash of such a transition would be staggering, from gilded cage to literal chains. Historians still argue whether some patrons felt a moral obligation towards their enslaved concubine beyond mere self-interest, but evidence suggests such kindness was entirely discretionary and rarely provided any real security. You exist in a gilded cage, if you're lucky, but a cage nonetheless, with the bars unseen until it's too late. The comfort you might experience, the fine clothes, the good food, are not rights but privileges, granted and rescinded at a moment's notice, making every single moment of your life a negotiation for your continued precarious existence. Every smile, every service, every acceptance of intimacy is a calculated move to maintain your fragile security. The absolute power of the patron. The absolute power wielded by your Roman patron is the sun around which your entire world orbits. This isn't a reciprocal relationship. It's a hierarchy, steep and unforgiving, with you firmly at the very bottom. Your patron, whether a prominent senator, a wealthy merchant, or even a rising equestrian, embodies pater familias, the head of the family, a legal concept that grants him immense authority over his household, including his slaves. For you, an enslaved concubiness, this means his will is law, his desires are commands, and his whims are destiny. You are, in every legal and practical sense, an extension of his property, your very existence defined by his ownership. Imagine a subtle shift in his gaze, a slight tightening of his lips, and your heart might pound with apprehension. Every gesture, every word he utters holds immense weight. A compliment could mean continued favour and comfort. A frown could signal impending disfavour, perhaps even punishment. You learn to read his moods with an almost psychic sensitivity, anticipating his needs before he even vocalizes them. It's a survival mechanism, a constant low-level anxiety that permeates your days and nights, a silent hum of fear just beneath the surface of apparent calm. This power extends to the most intimate aspects of your life. Your body is not your own. It is his to command. You might be summoned at any hour, day or night, and expected to comply without question, without hesitation. It's a peculiar tidbit of Roman law that while a free Roman man was expected to be the active partner in sexual relations, the passive partner, particularly if enslaved, was considered to have no agency or shame in the matter, precisely because they were property. This complete subservience means you have no voice, no right to protest, no ability to refuse. Your desires, your preferences, your very self are irrelevant in the face of his will. If your patron's affections wander, or if he becomes bored, there's nothing you can do. You might be replaced by a younger, fairer face, or simply relegated to other, less desirable duties within the household. Historians still argue whether there were unwritten social codes that might have offered a slave some modicum of protection against the most extreme abuses, but such protections, if they existed at all, were fragile and entirely dependent on the individual patron's moral compass, which varied wildly. You are adrift on a sea of your patron's desires, with no anchor, no map, and no true control over your own destination. Your entire existence hinges on maintaining his favour. A precarious dance where a misstep could lead to ruin. A single wrong word could shatter your world. A day in the life, intimacy and servitude. So, what does a typical day look like for you? An enslaved male concubine within the sprawling confines of a Roman household. There is no single answer, of course, as your daily routines are meticulously crafted by your patron's personal preferences, his social standing, and the sheer size and complexity of his domestic world. However, one constant remains. Your existence is interwoven with his. You do not wake up and plan your own day. Your day unfolds in response to his needs, his schedule, and his desires. You might be roused before dawn, not by an alarm, but by the subtle stirrings of the household. Perhaps a senior slave, a dispensator, steward, or a vilicus, overseer, might give you specific instructions, their tone a reflection of your master's mood. Your first duties might involve preparing your patron's morning toilette. You could be responsible for fetching warm water, preparing his clothes, or assisting with his shaving and grooming. Imagine the intimate proximity, the quiet precision required as you lay out his toga, smooth its intricate folds, or perhaps even apply the scented oils he prefers. This is not just a chore, it is an act of service that places you in immediate personal contact with the man who controls your destiny. This early interaction sets the tone for your entire day, often defining the mood you must maintain. After his morning routine, your duties could diverge significantly. If your patron is politically active, you might accompany him to the forum, a silent shadow as he conducts business, or to the public baths, where you would assist him with his bathing rituals, perhaps holding his strigil, a curved tool for scraping off dirt and oil, or anointing him with oils. Your presence is functional, yet also a display of his wealth and power. A peculiar tidbit is that even highly educated slaves, often referred to as pedagogi, tutors, or librari, scribes, could also find themselves in positions of concubinage. Their intellectual skills were valued, but their bodies remained property. So, you might spend hours copying texts, reciting poetry, or engaging in philosophical discussions, only to be summoned for far more intimate duties later. The transition from intellectual companion to sexual object could be abrupt and jarring, a constant reminder of your dual role. Historians still argue whether there was a distinct class of enslaved concubines, or if it was simply a role assumed by certain male slaves based on their appearance or their master's preference, highlighting the fluid and often arbitrary nature of their roles. Your life is a tapestry woven from moments of luxurious idleness and intense personal servitude, all under the ever-present shadow of your master's command. You are always on call, always observing, always anticipating, your entire being dedicated to the service and pleasure of another. The gilded cage, comfort and cruelty. Your life as a concubiness is a strange, often disorienting blend of comfort and profound cruelty, a constant tightrope walk between indulgence and impending doom. On one hand, you might experience a level of luxury and ease that few free Romans, let alone other slaves, could ever dream of. Imagine living within a grand villa adorned with frescoes and mosaics, warmed by underfloor heating in winter, and cooled by expertly designed airflow in summer. You might wear fine clothes tailored to fit and eat exquisite food, delicate pastries, roasted meats, exotic fruits, from your patron's table, far superior to the coarse bread and gruel that sustained most of the urban poor. You might even have access to education, learning Greek or rhetoric if your patron values such intellectual companionship, gaining knowledge usually reserved for the elite. This isn't just about survival, it's about a gilded existence, a life of material privilege. Yet beneath this veneer of comfort lies an inescapable fundamental cruelty, your utter lack of agency. These comforts are not rights, they are privileges, bestowed and revoked at your patron's whim. You might sleep in a comfortable bed one night, and the next, after a perceived slight or a change of mood, find yourself relegated to a rough pallet in a drafty storeroom, or worse, sold to a brutal mining operation. The fine clothes, the rich food, the beautiful surroundings, they are all part of your commodification, making you a more desirable possession for your patron, or a more valuable asset if he decides to sell you. Your very existence becomes a display of his wealth and taste. It's a bit like a prized show dog, fed the best food, groomed meticulously, given a plush bed, but ultimately it's still property, its purpose dictated by its owner. A peculiar tidbit. Some very wealthy Romans were known to have extravagant slave houses, or even dedicate entire sections of their villas to their most favoured, including concubines, complete with their own smaller living quarters and amenities, further emphasising their status as prized possessions. This duality means every moment of apparent ease is tinged with anxiety. You might be enjoying a lavish banquet, participating in witty banter, but always one eye is on your patron, gauging his mood, anticipating his needs. Any slight deviation from his expectation, any hint of perceived disrespect, could shatter your fragile existence. Historians still argue whether the psychological toll of this constant insecurity was greater than the physical hardships faced by other slaves, but it's clear that the mental burden was immense. The fear of instant displacement, the knowledge that your world could collapse at any moment, is a silent torment. The comfort is a deceptive cage, offering temporary respite but never true freedom, reminding you with every soft pillow and every delicious mouthful that your life is not your own and never truly will be. The currency of beauty and youth. In ancient Rome, especially within the context of your role as a concubiness, your physical appearance is not merely a matter of personal vanity, it is quite literally your currency. Youth, beauty, and a certain undefinable charm are paramount. Your patron's desire for you is often sparked by these outward attributes, and maintaining them becomes an unspoken yet absolutely critical part of your daily existence. You are, in essence, a living sculpture, constantly maintained to please the eye and the whims of your owner. This rigorous upkeep is not for your own comfort or pleasure, but for his gratification and his social standing. Imagine the meticulous care taken with your body. You might be regularly bathed in scented waters, your skin smoothed with olive oil, perhaps even plucked of unwanted hair, a common practice for aesthetic appeal in Roman society, indicating refinement and purity. Your hair would be carefully styled, perhaps curled or anointed, with fragrant unguents, always in the latest fashion. Even your clothing, though prescribed by your patron, would likely be of fine linen or wool, clean and well maintained to highlight your figure, chosen to emphasize your desirability. The emphasis isn't just on cleanliness, but on an idealized aesthetic that aligns with contemporary Roman notions of beauty. For a male companion, this might include a slender build, delicate features, and a youthful, almost innocent visage, often referred to as puer delicatus, delicate boy. It's a bit like a competitive beauty pageant, except the judge is your owner, and the prize is your continued precarious existence. The stakes are your very survival and well-being. This constant scrutiny means you are always aware of your body, always conscious of how you present yourself. A blemish, a minor injury, or even the subtle onset of age could diminish your value in your patron's eyes and thus your very security. The fear of fading beauty is a pervasive pressure, knowing that time is your ultimate enemy. A peculiar tidbit is that some Roman patrons were known to send their favoured slaves, including concubines, to receive specialised training, not just in intellectual pursuits, but also in physical disciplines like dance or athletics, further enhancing their appeal and utility as living ornaments. Historians still argue whether some concubini might have exerted a subtle influence over their patrons through their charm and beauty, but any such power would have been entirely informal and dependent on the patron's individual affections rather than any inherent right, and could vanish as quickly as it appeared. Your reflection in the polished bronze mirror is more than just an image. It's a constant reminder of your role, your vulnerability, and the exacting standards you must perpetually meet to maintain your place. Beyond intimacy, companion, and confidant, while your primary role as a concubiness revolves around providing sexual and emotional gratification, your duties often extend far beyond the confines of the bedroom. You are in many ways a multifaceted companion, integrated into the social fabric of your patron's life. Think of it as being a highly specialized personal assistant, but with a deeply intimate and utterly subordinate twist. Your presence enhances your patron's image, caters to his comfort, and fulfills a broader need for companionship that might not be met by his wife, his children, or his male friends. You become an indispensable, albeit unacknowledged part of his daily routine. You might find yourself accompanying your patron to social gatherings like dinner parties or banquets, where you would sit beside him, a silent, attentive presence. While you wouldn't typically engage in the main conversations among his peers, you would be expected to anticipate his needs, refilling his cup, fetching a dish, or simply offering a comforting glance when he seeks it. You are part of the scenery, yes, but a very important part, signalling his taste and his wealth to his peers. Your quiet attentiveness is a performance in itself, a subtle display of devotion that reflects well on him, a living testament to his personal power. It's a bit like being a living, breathing accessory that subtly elevates the status of the wearer, a carefully chosen element of his public persona. A peculiar tidbit, some patrons specifically sought concubini, who possessed qualities like a melodious voice for singing or graceful movements for dancing, turning them into living entertainment for their guests, transforming them into a source of prestige and amusement. Beyond social events, you might also serve as a private confidant, a sounding board for your patron's thoughts, worries, or ambitions. Perhaps he finds a unique solace in your presence, someone who listens without judgment or ambition, precisely because you have no power to challenge him. You might spend hours simply sitting with him, offering quiet company while he reads, writes, or contemplates, absorbing his frustrations and ambitions in silence. This intimate companionship, free from the political machinations of his public life or the domestic duties of his wife, can be a valuable aspect of your role, providing him with a unique space for vulnerability. Historians still argue whether these emotional bonds, if genuine, ever offered a measure of reciprocal affection or even a subtle form of influence for the concubiness, but any such influence would always have been unofficial and entirely dependent on the individual patron's character and affections, never on your inherent rights. Your existence is one of constant availability, whether for physical intimacy, social display, or simply a comforting, silent presence, a shadow always at his side. The intellect as an asset. Some Roman patrons, particularly those of refined taste or intellectual bent, sought more from their concubini than mere physical presence or companionship. For these individuals, you might find yourself expected to engage in a deeper, more cerebral connection, elevating your role beyond purely domestic or sexual service. This wasn't a universal expectation, of course, but it speaks to the diverse range of needs that a wealthy Roman might seek to fulfill through his household, seeking not just a body, but a mind as well. Imagine being summoned not for a bath, but for a discussion. Your patron might have a keen interest in philosophy, poetry, or history, and he desires a sharp mind to engage with, a cultivated voice to listen to, or even a talented hand to copy texts. You might spend hours in his private library, reading aloud from scrolls, debating a point of Stoic philosophy, or analysing the metre of a Greek epic. Your ability to engage intelligently, to offer insightful comments, or simply to be a knowledgeable audience would be highly valued, making you a prized intellectual commodity. This intellectual engagement is a peculiar tidbit, highlighting that even within the confines of slavery, some individuals could cultivate and utilise their intellectual abilities, even if ultimately for their master's benefit. It's a bit like being a living, breathing encyclopedia, but one that can also provide intimate comfort, a unique fusion of roles. This aspect of your role could be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it might offer a degree of mental stimulation and a sense of purpose beyond purely physical duties. You might gain access to education, to rare texts, and to conversations that would be utterly inaccessible to most other slaves, expanding your own understanding of the world. On the other hand, it adds another layer of pressure. You must always be prepared, always informed, always ready to impress. Your intellect, like your body, becomes a tool for your patron's gratification, and its value is entirely determined by his appreciation and his intellectual appetites. The constant demand for intellectual performance adds to the mental burden, a silent expectation that weighs heavily. Historians still argue whether such intellectual concubini might have enjoyed a higher social standing within the household, even among other slaves, due to their specialized skills, but this would still be a hierarchy within servitude, not a path to true freedom. Your mind, just like your appearance, is another asset to be utilized by your patron, and its value is entirely determined by his appreciation and his intellectual appetites, a resource to be exploited for his benefit. The freedman's paradox: freedom and lingering chains. While the vast majority of male concubines were enslaved, a smaller, though still significant number, might have been freeborn but of lower social standing, or crucially, freedmen. This distinction introduces a slightly different, though no less complex layer to your life as a concubiness. If you are a freedman, you have gained your freedom from slavery, either through manumission by your former master, or by purchasing your liberty. This is a monumental step, granting you legal personality and some basic rights that enslaved individuals could only dream of: the right to marry, own property, and even vote in some circumstances. However, even as a freedman, your past casts a long shadow, and your present often remains deeply entwined with your former patron. As a freedman concubinus, you are no longer property in the legal sense. You cannot be bought or sold, and theoretically, you have the right to own property, enter contracts, and even vote if you meet certain criteria, though your social standing would likely make full participation difficult due to social prejudice. This newfound freedom, however, often comes with a caveat, a continuing obligation to your former master, now your patron. This relationship, known as patronage, means you owe him obsequium, deference and respect, and opere services, which could include continuing to fulfill your role as a concubinus. It's a bit like finally paying off your massive student loans, only to find you still have to babysit your old professor's kids every weekend. Indefinitely, a perpetual debt of gratitude. A peculiar tidbit is that manumission was often a public affair, sometimes even celebrated. but it rarely severed the ties of dependence completely. The former master continued to wield significant influence. Your position, while legally superior to an enslaved concubiness, is still profoundly dependent. You might gain some economic benefit or social advancement through this ongoing relationship. Perhaps your patron sets you up with a small business or provides you with an allowance, or even helps you secure a position in his broader network, offering a pathway to a more stable life. However, your role is often temporary. The freedman concubiness often represented a transitional phase. This is especially true if your patron eventually marries or if his interests shift. There's no formal legal commitment for him to maintain you as his concubiness, and he can cast you aside at will. Historians still argue whether freedman concubini might have had more leverage to negotiate the terms of their relationships, but any such leverage would have been informal and limited by their continued social and economic reliance on their patron. You might have legal freedom, but the chains of dependence, though invisible, remain strong, binding you to a past that refuses to truly release you. Economic vulnerability, the patron as your world. Whether enslaved or a freedman, your economic existence as a concubiness is characterized by one overwhelming fact: absolute dependency. You are, for all intents and purposes, financially beholden to your patron. This isn't a partnership where you contribute equally. It's a system where your livelihood, your comforts, and your very survival are entirely at his discretion. You have no independent income, no savings to fall back on, and certainly no retirement plan. Your patron is your sole provider, your bank and your future, the very foundation of your economic world. Imagine having no control over your own finances. If you are enslaved, any gifts or allowances you receive are ultimately still your patron's property in the eyes of the law. You cannot own anything, nor can you inherit. Every coin you touch is ultimately his. If you are a freedman, while you technically have the right to acquire wealth, the reality is often very different. Your patron might provide you with lodging, food, clothing, and perhaps even a small allowance, a peculiar informal provision for freedmen. But this generosity is a privilege, not a right. It can be withdrawn without notice. It's a bit like living in a luxurious hotel suite but having no credit card of your own. All the amenities are there, but the bill is paid by someone else, and they can cut off your access at any moment, leaving you adrift. A peculiar tidbit is that some freedman concubini might have been given responsibilities within their patron's business, like managing accounts or overseeing certain ventures, which could offer them a pathway to accumulating some personal wealth. But this was still under the watchful eye of their patron, never truly independent. This economic dependence severely limits your autonomy and agency. You cannot make independent decisions about your future, pursue your own interests, or even leave if you wish. Your life is fundamentally tied to the continuity of your patron's favor. If he ceases to support you, you are left with nothing, facing destitution and a potential return to the most brutal forms of labor. Historians still argue whether some concubini managed to amass significant personal wealth or property through gifts or shrewd management, even while dependent, but such cases were likely rare and always vulnerable to the patron's changing mood or financial circumstances. This pervasive economic vulnerability means that even the most comfortable existence is underpinned by a constant nagging fear of destitution, a fear that keeps you firmly in your place, perpetually aware of your fragile standing. Public scrutiny and social shame. Infamia. Now, let's turn to a particularly challenging aspect of your life as a concubiness: public perception and the sting of social shame. While Roman society, especially for men of higher status, was remarkably tolerant of same-sex relationships, there was a crucial distinction. It was perfectly acceptable, even expected, for a freeborn Roman man to be the active partner, the penetrator, in a sexual relationship. This demonstrated virility and dominance, a sign of his masculine power. However, to be the passive partner, the one being penetrated, was considered deeply shameful, particularly if you were a freeborn Roman citizen. For you, as a concubiness, your very role often placed you in this passive position, regardless of your personal desires or the nuances of the intimate act, making you an object of social contempt. Imagine walking through the forum accompanying your patron, and feeling the subtle glances, the hushed whispers that follow you. You might be dressed in fine clothes, a testament to your patron's wealth, but beneath the surface, a harsh judgment is being passed. While your patron might face little or no social stigma for keeping you, you are the one who bears the brunt of society's opprobrium, the public disgrace. This isn't necessarily overt hostility, but a pervasive, undermining sense of dishonor that colors every interaction. It's a bit like being a brilliant artist, but constantly being introduced as the one who paints pretty pictures for that rich guy, stripping you of your own agency and skill, reducing your identity to your connection to another. A peculiar tidbit: some Roman satirists and moralists would mock men who took on passive roles, even in heterosexual contexts, emphasizing the strong cultural value placed on active, dominant masculinity, highlighting how deeply ingrained this prejudice was. This social shame means you're likely viewed as infamis, a legal and social status denoting disgrace or dishonor. While not a formal legal conviction, infamia carries serious implications, effectively sidelining you from public life and preventing you from holding political office, participating in certain legal proceedings, or even serving in the military. It closes doors, not with a lock, but with a wall of disapproval, shutting off pathways that might otherwise lead to advancement or respect. Historians still argue whether the experience of social shame was more acutely felt by freeborn concubini compared to enslaved ones, as enslaved individuals were already legally disenfranchised and without honor to lose. Regardless, for you, it meant navigating a world where you were both desired and, in many social circles, subtly or not so subtly despised for the very nature of your existence, a constant reminder of your societal degradation. The concept of infamia, which you as a concubinus are likely burdened with, is not a simple matter of public disapproval. It's a social and quasi-legal designation that carries tangible and often devastating consequences for your life in Roman society. While it doesn't necessarily mean you've committed a crime in the modern sense, it signifies a loss of honor and reputation, effectively making you a second-class citizen, even if you are technically a freedman. For enslaved individuals, who already possessed no honor in the eyes of the law, the impact was perhaps less direct, but still contributed to their already marginalized status, piling another layer onto their existing lack of rights. Imagine wanting to participate in the vibrant public life of Rome, attending assemblies, serving in the legions, or even running for a minor magistracy. As an infamous individual, these avenues are effectively closed off to you. You are barred from holding public office, a fundamental aspiration for many Roman men, and your testimony in court might be deemed less credible, diminishing your voice and influence. It's a bit like having a permanent black mark on your record, preventing you from accessing certain opportunities, not because you lack talent or intelligence, but because your very existence, by its intimate nature, has rendered you dishonorable in the eyes of the dominant culture. This pervasive social stigma ensures that even if you gain your freedom, your past, and the perception of your role will follow you, a shadow that never truly lifts. A peculiar tidbit: actors, gladiators, and prostitutes were also typically considered infames, placing your status, in a way, alongside other professions deemed to lack traditional Roman gravitas and moral standing, associating you with the fringes of respectable society. This pervasive stigma doesn't just affect your public life, it can also impact your private interactions. Other free citizens might be wary of associating too closely with you, fearing that your infamia could somehow taint their own reputation, leading to social isolation. While your patron might shield you from some of the harshest direct consequences, the underlying perception of your dishonor is a constant presence, a silent judgment that follows you wherever you go. Historians still argue whether the practical impact of infamia varied significantly depending on the social status and influence of your patron. A powerful patron might mitigate some effects, but the underlying social judgment would remain, a deep-seated societal prejudice. Your life, therefore, is lived under a cloud of unspoken judgment, restricting your potential and reminding you daily of the societal disapproval tied to your role. The psychological burden, a life in anticipatory dread. Perhaps the most profoundly challenging aspect of your existence as a concubiness is the constant psychological toll of your precarious position. The luxurious surroundings, the fine food, the beautiful clothes, they are all a gilded cage, a constant reminder that your comfort is conditional, your safety an illusion. The omnipresent threat of being discarded, sold, or punished creates an underlying current of anxiety that never truly recedes, a low hum of fear in the background of every interaction. You might experience moments of genuine affection or companionship with your patron, moments of warmth that feel real, but these fleeting connections are always overshadowed by the brutal reality of the power imbalance, making true intimacy impossible. You learn to live with a heightened sense of awareness, perpetually attuned to your patron's moods, anticipating his desires, censoring your own thoughts and emotions before they can even form. There is no true self-expression, no unfiltered honesty, because your very survival depends on maintaining an idealized persona, a perfect reflection of what he desires. This constant performance, this internal vigilance, is emotionally exhausting, draining your spirit day by day. The inability to plan for your future, to build a life independent of your patron's whims, fosters a deep sense of hopelessness and a pervasive lack of control. You are, in essence, a permanent resident in a state of anticipatory dread, waiting for the shoe to drop. Historians debate the extent to which enslaved individuals internalize this lack of agency. But it's clear that the mental burden was immense, a silent suffering that went largely unacknowledged. The concubinous experience, while offering certain material advantages, arguably carried a unique psychological weight, a different kind of burden than the physical hardship endured by other slaves. It was a life lived in constant, intimate proximity to absolute power, where every kindness was a gift, every comfort a loan, and every moment of peace a temporary reprieve from the ever-present threat of total vulnerability. The constant negotiation of your worth, the perpetual need to please, creates a profound erosion of self. Your story is a chilling reminder of the complex and often brutal realities of love, power, and survival in ancient Rome, a testament to the resilience and the suffering of those caught in its intricate, unforgiving web.